Mega Bloks, the video game. Something that could have existed, something that almost existed, yet at the end of the day, this project ended up getting canceled. It's a sad story. It's a sad tale. We could have seen Master Chief in a way different adaptation than what we have seen currently. And honestly, I think this project is really interesting. It's kind of unfortunate that it did end up getting canceled or scrapped or not greenlit past the prototype phase. So we wanted to take a look back and analyze this lost and forgotten prototype for a Halo Mega Bloks video game that probably would have been kind of cool. Now there is one thing that is way cooler than lost Halo prototypes. You know what I'm talking about. Free samples. We're actually partnering up with GamerSupps to help fund our channel and content. And honestly, Luke and I started drinking GamerSupps about a month ago, and we're obsessed. 0 calories, 0 sugars, and enough caffeine to get you through the day, while also tasting amazing. And anyone who's fast enough to click on our link in the next 12 hours gets free samples. I mean, that's pretty hype. Just sent off to you. Because why not? Honestly, we chatted with the team at GamerSupps, and we just like their attitude and the fact that they're willing to give us a code that lets our audience directly support our content, while also everyone gets some great tasting energy. There's a ton of awesome flavors. I love the dragon fruit punch. Also, Luke's in the process of packing all his stuff up to move across the country so we can collaborate better on more Rocket Sloth stuff. And while he's surrounded in boxes, the one thing he hasn't packed is his GamerSupps waifu cup, which is like this whole other rabbit hole of limited time cups that they sell. And I'm sure we're going to talk about this later on when they have more coming out, but it's pretty wild. If you're quick enough, or if you're already convinced, you can just use our code RocketSloth or use the link down below for the free samples. Okay, let's get back to the video. Back in 2017, YouTuber PtoPOnline leaked an unreleased Halo Mega Bloks game that was in development a few years prior. While a lot of information around this project is still kind of shrouded in mystery, it was later officially confirmed by 343 Industries to be a real prototype that was in consideration to be greenlit for a full game. But what actually happened to this canceled Mega Bloks game? Why was it canceled, and who was responsible for it? Now, while details are still very vague as far as the development process went for this video game, this prototype build of the game appears to have been worked on somewhere between early 2013 till November of 2013 by the studio N-Space, who are responsible for making ports of other game franchises like Modern Warfare 2 for the Nintendo DS or James Bond Rogue Agent on the DS, and this game was programmed in the Unreal Engine 3. Now, if you watched our video about the Halo DS prototype, there were actually people speculating that N-Space was responsible for that Halo DS demo, though there isn't any full confirmation. It appears that that DS demo that was used was probably a modded version of Rogue Agent, though anyone really could have taken the game Rogue Agent and modded it to fit the Halo aesthetic for just a prototype build to give the idea of what Halo could look like on a handheld. So we still don't know to this day whether or not that DS prototype was actually from N-Space, but nonetheless, we do know that this Mega Bloks build was definitely theirs. And honestly, we love looking at the types of Halo games that were prototyped at one point and then canceled. We just like to think of that alternate timeline where we had Halo games like a Halo MMO or a Halo Mega Bloks game, and we never ended up actually getting it. Now, Mega Bloks and Halo actually started their partnership back in 2009 with Halo Wars, and ever since then, they put out a lot of sets featuring iconic Halo vehicles, characters, and more. Mega Bloks obviously is a competitor to LEGO, and while LEGO having branched out into licensed video games years ago, it seems like Mega Bloks doing the same could have also maybe worked out for them, especially with a strong IP like Halo to actually back the whole thing up. It actually seemed like a really cool crossover idea for Halo and Mega Bloks to team up for a different type of game that could maybe go out on a year off when there isn't a main Halo release. Also, a quick side note, have you ever wondered why LEGO was never considered for Halo? It's actually because LEGO doesn't depict realistic military guns, or at least back then they didn't, and every weapon in LEGO sets were actually either like a sword or some old-timey weapon like a blunderbuss, but never would they put modern weapons into sets, so it ended up making sense for Halo to go to Mega Bloks instead, because they're like, hey, give those toys some guns, let's go. So it made sense because obviously they want to portray Master Chief with some of the iconic weapons from the games. Anyways, with Mega Bloks probably wanting to break into the video game market, N-Space was looped into this and they began working on a prototype, and for that studio they considered it to be a full-on AAA project. So this prototype wasn't just like a concept pitch like you would see in like a quick meeting or something like that. This was very fleshed out and actually much more in-depth than what you probably would expect to see from something considered just a video game pitch. Also, it's kind of surprising, they put 10 months of full-on development work into this project just for the whole game to end up being scrapped. Now, the gameplay of this build, which is called Project Haggard, is actually in a way very reminiscent of the LEGO Star Wars games, with the third-person view, magnetic aiming to make it easier to hit enemies, and collecting blocks from fallen enemies to build various structures and to progress through the levels. There are familiar Halo elements like shields and health, which were a part of the game, and so were weapon pickups. You can also build and craft your way into new areas by extending bridges or going up elevators that you would have to make. This build had about one fully finished campaign mission playable in this prototype, where you play as the Master Chief in a mission to defend the UNSC base close to a Forerunner structure, and during the level you run into various sets of enemies along the way. You also switch out with other Spartans, like there's this random orange Spartan randomly that you can switch in and out of. There's also a wide set of weapons and vehicles, which we'll talk about in a minute, but also there was this cool little cutscene here, which was just kind of goofy, but it kind of shows the charm and the direction that they were trying to approach this project from, and it is kind of interesting. Now, besides this one level that's more fleshed out and also had a really unpolished level, and it's kind of hard to see what the second level could have been. It could have just been a larger sandbox testing grounds, but it is cool to look at nonetheless. But honestly, for what there actually is in this play demo, there's an interesting sandbox here, which is kind of unique. Like, just from looking through the footage, weapon-wise, there's a little bit of variety, which is surprising for something that was canceled in the prototyping stages. We have an assault rifle, a needler, this BR shoots surprisingly quickly, there's a shotgun, and of course the rocket launcher. It also seems like from this menu that there is a focus rifle, a saw, a storm rifle, there's stickies and frag grenades, and a gravity hammer. Also, the energy swords in this, and it looks pretty cool. Now, I didn't see too much as far as equipment goes. There was a couple of equipments though that were in this prototype, like for instance a drop shield, and there's also invisibility, like active camo, that you could activate as well. And of course, once again, surprisingly enough for a prototype, the amount of vehicles that went into this was pretty impressive. It really makes us wonder how much of a budget this prototype build had, or if this was a project that was maybe actually greenlit for development and then canceled very early on, because there's a lot of stuff just generally laid out here. Vehicle wise, we can see the Warthog, which looks surprisingly good controlling wise, a mongoose, a ghost, a scorpion tank, even a wasp. And after a lot of the main fighting sections, it looks like Master Chief and company would parkour up some cool Forerunner structures. This kind of actually looks like a lot of fun. And honestly, the game would have supported split screen, something that existed here in this build of the game, yet not in Halo Infinite. As far as the musical selection that was used in the prototype, it looks like they mostly went for reusing classic tracks from the Halo franchise. There's some newer songs in there from like the Halo 4 era, but I did recognize some good old classic Halo 3 music. Also, I suspect that a lot of the weapon sounds and the Covenant sounds were also recycled from existing Halo games. Now, interestingly enough, after PtoPOnline leaked all of this footage, Bonnie Ross, head of 343 Industries, actually made a statement in regards to the gameplay footage that was released online. Essentially, she confirmed that Project Haggard was a real thing, noting that it had a lot of fun ideas and invention behind it, but ultimately didn't progress beyond the early prototyping levels that are shown in the recent video. This is just one example of several similar projects we have evaluated throughout the years, a process that we continue exploring on an ongoing basis. Now, the reason that this game was scrapped was never confirmed, but it is said that Microsoft was the one that ended up turning down the project, not Mega Bloks not wanting this game to exist. At this point, we can only speculate why Microsoft decided against the game, and the most likely reason was that it was programmed for the Xbox Xbox 360, and the Xbox One had just come out in 2013, and they likely didn't want to put a Halo game onto an older console with their newest console just releasing. Now, interestingly enough, there was another game that N-Space was working on around the same time, which was called Backyard Heroes. And right away, you can kind of tell that the Halo Mega Bloks game and Backyard Heroes do kind of look similar. And it gets deeper than you thought, as when you actually load up the demo for Backyard Heroes, which also was a canceled game, you can still spawn in some of the Halo vehicles through the command menus. Now, once again, while not much information is known about the development window for Backyard Heroes, the information that we could find suggests that the game was being worked on around September 2013, which means that this started development after the Halo prototype was already in the works. And what we can speculate is that maybe they knew that there was a chance the Halo game wouldn't be greenlit, or maybe the writing already was on the wall, and they wanted to maybe have the option to still release a game using at least some of the groundwork that they had already done for Halo. Ultimately, Backyard Heroes also ended up being canceled, and N-Space themselves actually ended up shutting down in 2016. It does seem kind of odd they spent 10 months working on a prototype for it just to be canceled by Microsoft, but at the end of the day, N-Space probably saw it as a chance to work on a big franchise, and they wanted to present the best possible looking project that they could. Honestly, looking at all of the footage from this, I genuinely think that this could have been a really fun title had it released. Now, it's not every day we get to look at an unreleased prototype of a game, but very oftentimes I can look at something like the canceled Halo MMO game or a Halo DS game and see how the game could fail to live up to the expectations of the franchise. But something fun like this that's quirky and in a spin-off way and as polished as this prototype looks, it could have been a really fun game to play with some friends and kick back, especially since it would have probably supported co-op play and hopefully online co-op also. Hey, at least this game had split screen at launch. It never launched. At least in its pre-release days, in its demo, it could have split screen. It's also very possible that since this build came out of 2013, maybe they're trying to fill that gap where there wasn't a Halo release, with Halo 4 coming out in 2012, and in 2013 all we got was Halo Spartan Strike, but maybe Spartan Strike was another third-person type Halo experience that 343 didn't want to overcrowd the Halo brand by having two releases in the spin-off genre. But honestly, if I had to pick between Spartan Assault or this, I think I would have actually probably picked the Mega Bloks game. It looks like it could have been really neat, but I don't know, maybe I'm on my own here. What do you guys think about Halo Mega Bloks? It's a bit wild. Also, if you aren't already subscribed to this channel and maybe we just show up in your recommended, maybe consider subscribing and give us a chance. You can always unsubscribe later, but it helps us out a lot and you get to see our new content in the future. We cover all types of games. We've looked at canceled games and other games that maybe didn't survive as long as we had hoped they would. But that's it for today. We'll see you guys all next time with a brand new video.